1, 2, 3.
Are we on?
The Stanny, Danny, and Manny Show. A radio interview with President Gaede. Dr. Gaede?
Hello.
How you doing? What do you find to be the most challenging aspect of being president?
Well, that's a great question. I knew the college well when I became president, and so in that way, it wasn't a surprise to me. There's always so much more to do than you can do, and I think just setting priorities and figuring out what things you say yes to and what things you say no to, I think that's the hardest thing for me.
Right.
And also how to, this job doesn't know any limits, so you're doing things in the evening as well as during the day, and how to carve out time for family.
Right.
Our youngest daughter's a senior in high school, and one of the things I didn't want to happen this year was for me to kind of not be around.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure she minds. No. So carving out time for family is another challenge.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it's a great job because it's a great school.
Cool.
And actually, our next question was, what do you find to be most rewarding as the president of Westmont?
Being in a college like this is a learning experience, and I think what I enjoy most is just engaging my colleagues on the faculty as well as the staff, hearing from them, hearing their questions, and also engaging students. That book, for example, you have in front of you, little promo here, Incomplete Guide to the Rest of Your Life, mostly results from questions from students.
Really?
I've noticed that.
Yeah.
A lot of them are.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
And that's generally what I've done in chapel, that I've responded to student questions. So I find the engagement on a college campus like this, the things discussed, the questions asked, the truths pursued to be what's fun. And I enjoyed that as provost, and I enjoyed it as a prof, I enjoyed it as president.
This section just really got me. I'll just read it. Page 78, 79, and chapter on love and grace. Dr. Gaede writes, that we don't regularly wake up feeling stunned by the morning in all its beauty and majesty and wonder is an abomination, I think. That we don't lie down at night, seeing the foggy dew on the trees, or hearing the sounds of night critters, or seeing the stars as thick as sugar against a jet black sky. That we don't see and hear all of that and weep for joy is just amazing. That we don't regularly marvel at how our bodies work, what our eyes take in, the music our ears hear, the various tastes our tongues can hardly describe, they're so varied, the things we can learn and enjoy, that we can do all these things every day and not drop down on our knees in worship and wonder. Well, that is the wonder. That is the wonder.
Yeah, and when I'm writing or when I'm speaking, I'm mostly talking to myself, by the way. The questions that interest me are questions that when I hear them I say, yeah, that's a great question. And right there I'm asking a question that I ask of myself a lot.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that drives us away from happiness is that we tend to focus on the things that we don't have, and we seek them. And we spend a lot of time pursuing things we don't have instead of appreciating what we have. And I would say that's one of the messages of the book, that we have much to be grateful for and much to be to praise God for. But we sort of ignore it much of the time.
Especially
and all those examples that are in there that you just read, I mean, they're there all the time, and maybe that's the problem.
Right.
So we just take them for granted. I don't take the moon for granted here at Santa Barbara. You ever see the moon come up? I mean, it's fabulous.
Really?
It'll come up over the mountains. What you need to do is go over to the mesa sometime, and then head sort of as if you're heading towards L.A., and the moon will rise when it's a full moon, and it'll knock your socks off. That always arrests my attention. Yeah. But most of the time I take it for granted, and shouldn't. I think it is an abomination. So, frankly, it's when I'm consumed, I'll talk about myself, right? Because I'm not sure about others, but it's when I'm consumed with myself that I don't recognize and appreciate the creation around me. And so it's coming out of myself. It's as I appreciate and love God more, as well as others, that I'm able to appreciate the things around me.
Right.
As I turn inside, I forget them.
Uh-huh.
You know, and we were talking about my job before. One of the things that this job does, and maybe all jobs do it, but you know, if every minute is precious and you've got so much to do and you can't do it all, it's easy to turn sort of inside and to turn towards trying to be as efficient as possible, getting everything down and everything done, and ignoring the things around you. And I think in a sense it can get you focused overly on yourself, on your own responsibilities, and ignoring what you have around you. So that's something I have to work at.
Oh, yeah. Page 122 and 123, for those of you listeners who have the book in your hand and want to read along.
Which you all do.
Follow intently.
I do recommend you go out to the bookstore and purchase this. It is a...
really good deal.
It's wonderful. Yes, it is a good deal. The context of this, you're with a couple buddies. One buddy is struggling with a marriage, and the other one's trying to help him out. One man says, I don't think I can ever be really happy with Jen. We're just too different. There's no real satisfaction. I'm just not happy. Another friend says, so what? You say, John, you don't think you could ever be completely happy with Jen. Well, so what? What makes you think your happiness is all that matters? Why isn't your word, your vow, more important than your happiness? Why isn't Jen more important than your satisfaction? And why in the world can't we live with discomfort anymore these days? I mean, are we called to escape painful relationships or reclaim them? Are we supposed to flee hurting marriages or redeem them? Did Jesus say, throw off your cross and do your own thing, or take up your cross and follow me? That really was a huge, I guess, revelation for me. I think most people think of life as pursuit of happiness,
right,
and not the pursuit of integrity or righteousness or holiness.
Which is exactly how I felt when I was there listening to this conversation. I remember when he asked John that question. Now we're up in the mountains, we're all alone, so it's late at night. I thought, wow, that's an amazing question, which I probably couldn't have asked. It was too bold. The question was too bold, but he did it with affection as well. So it didn't alienate John. In fact, obviously John listened because he stayed quiet, but he wound up going home, and he did redeem his marriage. But the question is a huge one, and I think, and I use the word happiness here in a negative sense, but I actually think if you try to pursue happiness in the sense of making yourself happy,
right,
you won't. I think in the long run, it's living with your commitments, living with integrity, and serving others that you do end up being happier.
How can we learn to live in such a way that our integrity is more important than our own happiness?
Well, it does seem to me that fundamentally one doesn't have integrity by trying to have integrity. That you, in a sense, all that means is that you're being more principled about your self-preoccupation. I think integrity only comes by having standards that are external to yourself. I think it is loving God enough to want to follow Him, and to live with integrity as a follower of Christ that gives you a life of integrity. I don't think a life of integrity comes from simply kind of laying out some principles you think are right, and then you follow them. I think that becomes legalism. In fact, I think that may take you away from actually being a person of character. But I do think loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul and strength, and figuring out what that means, is a way of living your life with integrity, which then I think makes you ask different questions as you come to choices in your life. And there are many times when when you make pretty hard choices. Hanging in with a relationship, for example, that's not going well, is a hard choice, and I think that's difficult for us to do, especially when you're younger. You have your life in front of you, and you think, boy, oh boy, maybe I've blown it here or whatever. To hang in and work through the relationship as opposed to giving up with it, and with giving up on it is tough. And besides that, we learn that all the time. I mean, I've often wondered about the way we handle relationships through high school, college years. We sort of try them out, and I'm not just talking about male-female relationships, but friendships too. There are things you kind of try them for a while, and well, this doesn't work. You go to something else.
Yeah.
We don't have any sense of being committed to one another, and I think that makes it harder then to live with integrity. And I think that in this kind of a culture, that's only going to come to the extent that you're doing it, not out of asking the question, what's good for me, but what's right. What does God care about? What does it mean for me to love God and love my neighbor? I think the practical question is, what's going on in this other person's life, and how can I serve them and love them? And if you ask the question about what does it mean to love them, and obviously I'm using the term love here, not necessarily in a romantic way. If you ask that question, then the question becomes, who are they? What do they need? What's their situation, rather than what is mine? And that may mean that you say hard things, like what was said in this particular situation here to John. That was a hard thing to say. But he said that, I think, out of love for that individual. So if it seems to me, if you love others, you probably say some things that they don't want to hear, but you say it out of your care for them, and I think then that is what in the end makes for a good relationship long term. It doesn't mean every relationship goes on forever. Obviously people die and they move and so on. I think Jesus is the model, obviously, in a lot of ways, but especially here. I know one of my favorite stories is his meeting the woman at the well, and she's a Samaritan. He's a Jew. He's a rabbi. I mean, he's a man who shouldn't be talking to a woman. He's a Jew who shouldn't be talking to a Samaritan. He's a rabbi teacher who really has no business kind of encountering this person. What does he do? He comes up to her, asks for water, and then he asks her, "Where's your husband?" And she says, "I don't have one." He said, "You're right. You have 5. And the one living with you now is not your husband." Basically tells her she's committing adultery. Then he sits down, he tells her about the living water, really tells her about himself, which she doesn't entirely understand. But it's a wonderful combination of loving this woman and being willing to cross a lot of boundaries to do that. But he didn't say, "You're okay, I'm okay." He confronted her with who she was. And I think love does that. It's both confrontational and inclusive at the same time.
Now, I'm a science major, and I really enjoyed the lecture the chapel that you gave a few weeks ago about the sciences. So I was wondering, do you have a favorite science yourself?
Well, probably I liked physics the most. I don't think I did all that well in physics. When we went through, you took a sort of a lower level physics class your freshman year in high school, then biology, then chemistry, and then physics in your senior year. And I felt like I punted in my physics class in my senior year. But I really like physics. I find it interesting. The visuals on it, for me, are really interesting. And I think I like geometry for that reason as well. Chemistry, I did fine in chemistry, but it didn't take quite as much for me, and I have no idea why. It could be, sometimes it's the prof, sometimes it's where you are in that stage when you come to it. But
yeah, that's really good news for me because I'm actually a physics major.
Congratulations.
But that's really interesting because chemistry doesn't come as easy to me, and something that I've noticed is people who usually aren't really science majors used to, or normally are more, they like chemistry a lot better than physics, or chemistry seems to come easier for them than physics if they're not really into a science, unless they're into chemistry, but in which case it probably would. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know. It's really interesting.
I've thought that about biology, that biology sometimes is, at least early on, a little more accessible.
Right. That too.
And so people can stay with it a little bit longer. Physics, the math can do you in.
Right.
And so that's I think one of the issues people struggle with.
That's
is
true.
They move through it. But I mean, they're all fabulous. I had an unfortunate experience in biology when I was a freshman in college. In that I was into the class, but I couldn't quite figure out what the prof was doing. Well, the prof really started with what we would call now biochemistry, and it took me a long time to figure that out.
Right.
But I do love biology, and it's easiest for me now to read biology. My favorite books. I love the Psalms. I always stay in the Psalms. I always stay in the Psalms and the Gospels. What I try to do is I'm reading 4 parts of the Bible at once all the time.
Wow.
And I'll be reading in the Psalms. I'll be reading a Gospel, and then I usually pick a letter, a New Testament letter, and then a historical book, and it keeps me thinking more broadly. I think about the Bible.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards that way of doing it too. All right, well now it's time for the lightning round. What book are you reading right now? You're probably reading several, but...
I am actually. I'm in the middle of the biography of John Adams by David McCullough. But I started this other book by William Miller on, I think it's The Ethics of Lincoln. I don't know why I'm reading these history books, but what he does is he looks at Abraham Lincoln's life in terms of virtue and character issues. It's a fascinating piece.
What's the last good movie that you've seen lately?
The last one was Beautiful Mind. That was the most recent movie that I really liked, and that one caught me totally by surprise. I was not aware of the ending and what was going on, so I was completely taken by the thing.
Yeah. Now that we've heard your opinion on monkeys and squirrels separately, would you be able to pick a favorite between the two?
Yeah, I do think that I would go with a squirrel.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
I really like, I'm a chocolate freak.
Chocolate ice cream is good.
But a good cappuccino flavor ice cream is good. I love gelato.
Sweet. Well, that's a good note to end on, gelato.
We've enjoyed this interview very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Inviting me down.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to know that you do like squirrels more than monkeys. All right, well, we will get back to some music. This is KZSB, your alternative to normal radio.